Check. There we go. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Great attendance for a school council meeting, for sure. Great to have you here as we discuss some things related to Tabor Christian High School. So before we begin, a few things. The plan for the evening will be as follows. I know we have some parents here that are parents of grade 8 and grade 9 students at Tabor Christian. So I will do a really short orientation for you just to give you a better sense of who we are at Tabor Christian High School and how we run, so to speak. And then after that, we have Dr. Wilco Tymanson here. He's the superintendent of Horizon School Division. He's going to talk a little bit about the process, like how we move forward in the voting and that kind of thing. I know I've had some people ask, well, is this a done deal? It's like, no, we need to have a vote. So he'll explain kind of how that works. And then after we'll get into more discussion about a 4.5-day week versus a 5-day week, reasons for both, and why this is even being brought to the table, because I know some people might have that question as well. So, we'll just kind of proceed as along those lines. So we'll go to the next slide here. And I just want to start with a quick devotional. And John 14, verse 6, this is our theme verse for the year at Tabor Christian High School. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And we're really focusing on the way. So the truth, we probably feel like we have a sense of what Jesus meant when he said that. And the life, we think of everlasting life or hope for life. The way, what does that mean? And so we've been with our students exploring, both in our crew groups, our small sort of social groups, and just in class discussions and those kinds of things, what the way is. And of course, we also explore that more in chapel. And so I don't think I could stand up here and give you one definitive answer, right? It's one of those questions where you're constantly searching, and it's almost in the search or struggle for understanding of meaning. That's how we kind of grow in our faith. So I want to reflect on that a little bit, and I'm going to use some reflection through history. I'm amazed. I didn't get any eye rolls. I didn't get any groans. So normally if I did this with students, that would definitely be the case. So thank you for that. So we'll go to the next slide. And so here I'm using a quote from C.S. Lewis, who is one of my favorite authors. No doubt you're familiar with him. And he talks a little bit about the reason, I guess, for studying history. And it says here, a man who has lived in many places is not likely to be deceived by local errors of his native village. The one who studies history has lived in many times and is therefore in some degree immune from the nonsense that pours forth every age. While there is no guarantee that knowledge of the past should allow us to see things a bit more clearly, and to ignore there's no guarantee, that knowledge of the past should allow us to see things a bit more clearly and to ignore some of the more pressing and sensational messages that bombard us every day. And so Lewis, I remember reading him, he said too, if the only thing you read is a newspaper, you'll know what's going on, you'll gain information. But in his opinion, in terms of gaining wisdom and context, it might actually decrease, which is an interesting thought. He very much believed in that you need to know the context. You need to know this is what's going on. What does that mean? And by interpreting what's happening, we can sometimes look at past examples to help us understand movements. No movement's exactly alike, but there are always some commonalities that move throughout history. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is from a more recent author, David Bentley Hart. He says here, life in the kingdom of God is not about wealth, power, and prestige. It is about self-control, self-denial, and obedience to Christ. If you want to make a difference in your life, read about the lives of the greats to be reminded of what it takes to be a disciple and a leader. So history is inspiration. And then the second quote, studying church history doesn't simply lock a church in the past. That's sometimes a criticism. A study of church history also frees us to try things in new ways. A study of the past shows the numerous ways in which things have been done. And that's the advantage of studying history. It's not that you're confining yourself to things that were done before, but through learning how things moved forward, we get a better sense of maybe how to move forward today. And when I reflect on those quotes and doing a little bit of reading of the early church fathers, I think about our faith. And it's a faith very much obviously built on the foundation of God and his Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. But it's also promoted and progressed through the early church fathers who gave their lives to make sure that we had a clear understanding of the truth that Jesus taught. Something built on 2,000 years. And it's not that I think of myself as smaller that way, but I'm reminded of how powerful and how big and how awesome our faith is, and something that's endured throughout the ages. And therefore, something that I reflect on, I'm very grateful for today. And something I think then when I reflect on history, it helps me strengthen my faith as well. So also using some of those points to help give our students a sense of who they are. It's not just locked in the here and now, but things can be learned from what's happened previously. I think if we go to the next slide here, class, perfect. So just before I jump into a short orientation, I'll just open in prayer and just ask you to join me in that. Merciful, eternal Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to come before you to talk about things related to Tabor Christian High School. Lord, we give thanks for Christian education, for the blessings you've given us with the starting of this new school, with the parents and families that partner with us, the exciting building project that's going on. And Lord, as we discuss tonight in our meeting, things that impact our future as TCHS, we pray just for a blessing on all things said and done here, and we ask for your wisdom. We ask all these things in your holy name. Amen. All right, a short orientation. I will say we will have, for all of you new families, and even for your families currently with us who have kids moving on up, we'll have a full orientation in May. So at that time, we'll know who our staff is, we'll know what our schedule is, and we can give much more detail as to what you're looking forward to by having your son or daughter attend TCHS. But I'm just going to do a quick run through here, and if you have more questions, you can always catch me later. So here's pictures of some of our staff, and probably recognize a number, if not all of them. So Phil Vriend up here, and all these other people, some of our support staff, Mrs. Henry, Mrs. Hoekstra, Mrs. Neufeld, they all do a great job in contributing. Mrs. Beckering, who was here last year as well. Mrs. Ullman, who joined us this year in math, and then me, who just trying to hold things together as best I can. But I'm grateful for the staff we have, because that job is made much easier when we have a strong staff. So we'll move forward. Priorities, and then always in planning a new school, well, what's this going to be about? What are we going to focus on? What's the point, so to speak? And so one of the things, and this ties in with the Horizon School Division priorities, is strong instruction. So we want to continually engage in, when I say we, our teaching staff, discussions about how do we do this, and what are we doing well, and how can we get better? And so I would say that takes up a fair bit of time of our talking and planning and organizing in staff meetings to just try and continually improve in the instruction we offer. Crew, like I talked about that before, especially next year, will be exciting. All grade 9, 10, 11, and 12 will be put in different groups. Each group will have 9, 10, 11, and 12 students in it, and we get together to discuss things related to their faith life, their growth, maybe things they have in school, challenges, celebrations. We also do stupid stuff and silly stuff, but that's all part of high school too. I think we did it once where, what was one challenge? We had to wrap a crew member in toilet paper as tight as we could and had a vote on who made the best mummy. So, but yeah, it's all part of relationship building and community growing and those kinds of things. And then of course, continuing to develop. It's easy to talk about Christian education when we put a name on the front of a school. We start off with maybe a devotional and end in prayer. But how does that impact the day-to-day things that we do? And that's much easier said than done. But it requires constant kind of wrestling and thinking and growing and collaborating and challenging each other to learn in that way. So we'll move on. Christ-centered learning environment. Of course, if you have kids coming from TCS, it'd be pretty similar. We've talked about Crew, which are Tuesdays and Fridays this year. And then our theme. Well, actually, that theme was anchored in hope. That was the first theme we had. And that's still, just because that was the original theme, students picked that theme, that still kind of forms part of our growth and our development too. We'll continue on. Experiential learning. Learning is not just about what's in here. We talk about head, heart, and hands. Well, of course, the head you think about, oh yeah, I just got to fill this up with information. That's one level of learning, but if that's all it is, you could probably log onto a computer and read all you wanted to read and do the same thing. Learning is also challenging people, their hearts, especially in Christian education. Where is your heart at? And where should it be at? And how do you help it grow? And then your hands. So if you got this and this, how does that impact your actions and your lifestyle? And so we want to kind of challenge students in all facets and get involved in different things. So whether that's with the food bank drive, work with Streets Alive, Voice of the Martyrs, a few other things you see up there, we engage kids in service learning as a way of learning through acts of service that I think are important for their growth. Yeah, Mr. Vreen's our PE, resident PE guys, had them do lots of different things in physical education as well, whether that's bringing in specialists and instructors or taking kids elsewhere to engage in different aspects of PE. And then our mentorship program, we actually have a group of grade 10 and 11s who go to Tabor Christian School once a week, and they mentor some of their middle elementary students as a way of obviously helping the TCS students, but it's great leadership development for them too, just trying to find opportunities for them to continue to grow in a variety of ways. So we'll continue on. General information, like I said, I'll get in more detail with this in May, but we'll just go quick over it. Grade 9s, of course, will be similar to what they're at now, but in high school we're in a semester system, which means that the first semester goes from September to January, and then you take your courses. In January you write your exam, and then you're done those courses, and then you start new courses, and they go February through June. And so as a way of kind of having grade 9 come along with the rest of the high school and having our schedules match up, we would have the grade 9s on a semester system. Many grade 9s do this in other schools. It's not uncommon. I think the one thing, I mean, you could maybe look at it both ways, but the one advantage is instead of doing 8 classes at once, now they have to do 4 or 5 at once, and then you write that exam, and then you're now focused on your new courses. So that'll be one thing. The grade 10s, I know in high school you hear things like spare time, but in grade 10s we're expecting students to have a full course load. They're in class all day, and as they get older, then sometimes there's some spares there. We'll move on. Work experience, and this is always exciting too. I wish they had this when I was in high school, but they didn't. Work experience. So students who are working in a job, we have a work experience coordinator who goes, checks out the workplace, and then students can earn credits through their part-time jobs. And I think that's a great program to kind of help kids continue to earn money, but then also to add credits while they're doing that. We usually start that in the second half of grade 10, just to let them get a full semester of schooling under their belt so they get a real sense of what we're about. But then we'll start that off for the grade 10s coming up shortly here. There's registered apprenticeship program, and that's a great program as well, where students are actually learning different kind of trades, and again, gaining credit and earning money through those programs. And so last year we had a student in a heavy-duty mechanic apprenticeship program. I know we've got one student who wants to pursue an electrician apprenticeship program this year. So those opportunities are available. Green Certificate program, we have a couple that are just signed up for that now. If students work on a farm, then they can get credits through a Green Certificate program as well. So there's lots of opportunities. The only thing I will say to that is we've had it where some students are so keen on working right away that they have to remember that there's still a school part, there's still requirements in school. And what I always say to students, these are awesome programs, but I'd always encourage them in terms of working, even after graduation, you'll have 40 years of your life to work. So you'll have lots of time to work. I would encourage them to get a high school diploma, and that'll give them more opportunity to make their jobs or that 40 years of work more meaningful, more fulfilling, those kinds of things. So really encourage kids to stick with high school and complete their coursework. I think it's really important, especially in today's day and age, and there's just lots of opportunities with that. And yeah, that ties in with this slide. Obviously job preparation, but like I already talked about, developing their attitudes and interests. We've had it where kids are on job exploration fairs where they're introduced to jobs they had no idea even existed. We talked with one person about touring Lamb Weston, and I introduced that to students, like, well, I don't know if that's that great. I mean, you just learn about potato peeling. It's like, no, there's a lot more to it than that, right? There's accounting, there's shipping, there's exporting, there's millwrights, there's welding, there's all kinds of different jobs that go into that sometimes students aren't even fully aware of. And so just exposing them to a variety of different occupations can help open their eyes and give them better sense of the opportunities that are available through education. And then finally, like I talked about too, schooling is as important as job preparation is. As Christian schooling, we want to continue to grow students in who they are as image bearers, as children of God. And I think that continues on throughout our life, but we want to continue to give them tools and gifts to develop in that area as well. So those are what we want to do. Quick overview of high school credits. Again, I'll go over this more in May, but students are required 100 credits. They're required grade 12 English, grade 12 social, grade 11 math, and a grade 11 science. They're required a grade 10 PE. And there's something called career and life management, which is also a grade 10 course. And then you have a combination of credits and options and those kinds of things to make sure that you're reaching 100 as well. So, like I said, I can talk more about that in the spring. The other quick thing I'll just add is for Tabor Christian High School, factoring into our mission and vision, we would have all students also take Christian studies courses through 10, 11, and 12 to help them, again, continue to grow in that way. So, we'll move on. Like I said, full orientation in May. We'll have more answers for any potential questions, our full staff, our schedule, all that kind of stuff. And here, this is really exciting too, because we've always been, like, this is our second year being here, and it's great. We're really, really blessed to be in this facility, and case in point tonight, to be able to use this, and to be able to stream this so that people can access via live stream as well. But we're excited about our new location, and I'm sure you've driven north of Tabor, you might have driven by there. Mr. Vreen went and took some pictures tonight, and those are what you see in front of you. But yeah, incredibly excited. They're still on schedule for being done in June, so we're looking forward to having our grand opening in September and yeah, kicking things off. And of course, it's a grade 9 through 12 high school, so very exciting. If you have any more questions about orientation, come ask me. Like I said, there'll be more available as the year goes on, but if there's something you really need to know now, you can definitely ask me. And at the end of tonight, I'll have my email address up on the slideshow. You can email me too, so it's up to you. If you have questions about the new building project, Kim Schellenberg is our society manager. She's probably the most involved, but you could also ask me and I can give you some information as well. So, all right, at this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Tymanson to come up, and he's going to share a little bit about the process for examining whether we go to a 4.5-day week or 5-day week and what that looks like.
Thanks, Jason. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, first of all, for coming out this evening. You know, it certainly is exciting when you see that photograph of the new building, and it's amazing what a community can do when it puts its mind to it, and especially when you're thinking about the future of your own children. So Tabor Christian Society in 2009 approached the Horizon School Division and wanted to form a partnership where we would join forces and work together for the betterment of students. And at that time, all of the schools in Tabor were on a 4.5-day week. And so a 4.5-day week more or less means that you have full-day schools on Monday through Thursday, but on Friday, the students get out at just about 10 minutes or so after 12. And at that time, Tabor Christian School was working on a 5-day week. And so the schools had full days on Monday through Friday. And at that time, they had opted to keep that school operating on a 5-day week. And so what happens, though, is when you look at the length of a school day, it's not about the number of days that are in a school year. It's actually the number of hours. And so there's legislation in the Education Act. There's agreements in place through collective agreements with the provincial government and the Provincial Teachers Association around the number of hours that students have to be in school and the number of hours that teachers can teach in a school year. And so, and those numbers differ from an elementary school and a high school. And so typically schools from kindergarten, so grade 1 to grade 9, there's 950 hours that are required in a school. But in a high school, there is actually 1,000 hours that's required. So you have to put in an extra 50 hours over and above what you normally put into an elementary school. And so when you look at those hours in an elementary school, you have more flexibility. You don't have provincial exams from a government perspective, so there are no grade 12 diploma exams. And when you end your school at the end of the year, you have more flexibility. So Tabor Christian, as an example, historically ends their school year much earlier in June, so than the rest of the schools or most of the other schools in our school division. And so part of the issue becomes that when you are dealing with a high school, the diploma exams have a significant impact. Those government exams have a significant impact on when you finish your school year. So whereas Tabor Christian might be getting out of school, as an example, in maybe the 10th or the 18th or so of June, a grade 12 student has to go to school until the 27th or 28th of June, because that's when their diploma exams are. And so what more or less happens when you're dealing with high schools is that you're actually looking at the 28th of June as the very last day of school, and then you start counting back and you start adding and you start building a calendar with the number of hours in that you have in place. And so what ends up happening as well is, because all of the other schools are interconnected, and it's ironic, it's kind of funny in terms of what drives a school calendar. So an exam from the government kind of is that you determine the last day. There are government rules around when you cannot have school. So there has to be a 2-week break, as an example, at Christmas. That's a legal requirement. You have to have a week break for Easter, as an example. There are those other holidays that are scattered throughout the school year as well. But there's also busing that's connected. And so, as an example, we have a variety of schools around our jurisdiction, and you can't just change one school calendar without impacting another school calendar when you have buses that transport a whole bunch of kids together. So in Tabor, all the buses more or less pick up students that go to a whole bunch of different schools, and Tabor Christian was one of them. And so because all the schools in Tabor are ending at noon, as an example, and Tabor Christian School ends at the end of the day on Friday, those families end up having to pick their kids up because the busing fleet that the jurisdiction operates doesn't operate at 3:30, it operates at noon. And so there's that whole variable piece, right, about how long should the day be and how many days are there, but it's all tied to hours. And so one of the things that often happens is that people ask is, well, when you go from 5 days to 4.5 days, my kids will be in school less hours. And the answer actually is no, they won't. They will still have 1,000 hours at a high school level that they have to be in school at. It's just a matter of when are you assigning that time period and on which days are you assigning it. And so the jurisdiction, and when I say the jurisdiction, or when I say the school board, that would be the Horizon School Division Board, and that's different from the Tabor Society Board. But the jurisdiction sets the rules for all of, as far as the instructional component, the staffing requirements for all of the schools in our school division, including both Tabor Christian School and Tabor Christian High School. And we have in many ways, we allow the community to make and have a voice in terms of what the school year looks like. And so we actually have some schools who over time have approached their communities and have asked for a 4-day week, as an example. So we have a school out in Lomond, and they actually only have 4-day weeks. And what ends up happening is that they have some students who are on long bus rides. There were parents who wanted their kids to work on the farms, and so they actually made a motion, this is quite a number of years ago, where they wanted to go to a 4-day week. And so in order to do that, you add almost an hour on to every day to make up for the time period. We have a couple of schools as well that, again, based on hours, so Barnwell School is kind of a mixture of 4 days and 4.5. So because they're an elementary school and they only need 950 hours, but their busing is connected to the Tabor schools, the kids start school there probably 15 minutes earlier because all the kids get picked up, they get dropped off in Barnwell, and then they get bused to Tabor, And they're already in school for 15 minutes, and then the Tabor schools start. And at the end of the day, they also have 15 minutes longer because the kids get picked up here, they get bused out to Barnwell. And so they actually acquire their 950 minutes earlier than the Tabor schools do. And so they actually end up having a 4.5-day week in the first, before Christmas, and a 4-day week after Christmas. And so there are busing and hours have an impact on schools. But what ends up happening is when a community wants to change what that school week looks like, typically it starts at the school council level. And they have a meeting and they talk about whether or not they want to change to a different schedule. And when they just vote as a school, an executive or a small group of individuals, when they say we want to change our school calendar, and they pass that vote, and your school council has passed that vote that they want to explore that notion, they then come and let me know that. And then what happens is our board of trustees, our school division board, has a process that I then start, and this is part of it. And so what ends up happening is we actually want to hear from every single parent who has a child in that school whether they want to keep the current schedule or whether they want to keep or change to a new schedule. And so that's the opportunity tonight, is that everybody will get an opportunity to vote. Mr. Visser will hand out some sheets of paper to you for voting. You don't have to fill those in tonight. If you want to take them home and have a talk with your spouse, with your wife or your husband, and talk a bit about it, you can certainly do that. We don't need the answer tonight. We also know that there are some people joining us through the internet, and they want to be able to have a voice as well. And we know that some people couldn't make it tonight, but their voice is important as well. And so once we have an opportunity to hear from everybody in terms of whether they want it or not, we look at that tally, and every family gets one vote. So it doesn't matter if you've got 8 kids in the school or 1 student in the school, you get one vote as a family. And we then count up all the votes, and it needs to be more than 66% of the families should be voting for something in order for it to potentially move forward. And I say potentially move forward because the way the board policy is, the Horizon School Division board policy, is that it's the school board that makes the final decision. So if it's under 67%, the board won't even talk about it, they won't even look at it. If it's over 67% that are in favor of changing it, then the board will have a conversation, and more often than not, when the parents are saying, yes, we want to make a change, the board votes in favor. But there have been times, as an example, so last spring at this time, the community of Milk River had explored looking at moving to a 4.5-day week. And there were a number of parents who were really strongly in favor of it. And they had an opportunity like this to talk and ask questions. But then when the final vote came, they didn't get their 66%, and so the school year stayed the same. Excuse me. But some of the reasons for doing it that parents came forward with was that, at a high school level, it doesn't make sense to have all of these hours that you put in on a full day, Monday to Friday, and you reach your 1,000 hours on June 5th, and then all of a sudden you have no school anymore for 3 weeks, and then your kids have to write this exam that could be, historically, is worth 50% of their final mark and determines whether they graduate from high school or not, and they've had no opportunity to review at the grade 12 level, as an example. So parents saw it as it's important to finish and build a school calendar that goes right to the end of June. So that was part of the rationale for part of the conversation. There were always parents who indicated, as an example, that said, you know what, our kids in high school play a lot of sports, and often those tournaments are in other communities, and they start earlier. They don't start on Saturday. They often start playing already on Friday afternoon. And so our kids are missing school to travel to these sporting events. And this way, what can happen is, instead of missing school, they actually still can have the instructional time during the Monday to Thursday and Friday morning, but then there's more opportunity for athletics on a Friday afternoon, as an example. So there are different things that are a positive. Some parents will look at it and go, but my kids are small, because in Milk River they were looking at it as well for an elementary school. And so now suddenly some of the parents were going, you know what, both my husband and I work. And so now suddenly, who's going to look after my little kids Friday afternoon when I'm working? Right? And so they felt that it was more important to have the kids in the school all day long. But when you look at it as well, the number of hours don't change. And so instead of now, let's say if you have to look after your kids and find a daycare or a babysitter, instead of finding 3 hours on a Friday afternoon, you may have to find an hour Monday, an hour Tuesday, an hour Wednesday, or an hour Thursday after school. So sometimes the actual cost isn't different. It's just a matter of, are you doing it for a shorter period of time on 4 days or a larger period of time on a half day? From a high school perspective, that's typically not as big of a deal. The kids are more often old enough to be on their own when they're at home. So the parents have different thoughts, and the opportunity really here tonight is that some of you might have really strong feelings one way or the other. You might really like it and think it's a great idea, or you might really hate it. And you might want to share your thoughts with other people in the room today. And so it's an opportunity to hear from you. If you think you have a really good reason why we should move one way, or a really good reason why you should not, I would welcome you. We do have some mics. I'd welcome you to just raise your hand, and we can certainly bring a mic over to you to share that. The other piece is that if you have a question about what does this mean, what about this, can you explain this, I'm more than willing to explain that as well. And then, like I said, at the end of the evening, we'll give you a sheet of paper where you can vote. We would ask that you return it back to the principal, Mr. Visser. And we need all of those responses by the middle of February. So let's say Valentine's Day, February 14th. That way, the school board has the ability then to look at that, because if we have to change the schedule, then we need time to make sure that all of the other components that are important, that fall into place, that are connected to that, will also fall into place. And so if, as an example, if it does move to a 4.5-day week, we would also need to start looking at busing for this school, because right now parents pick up their kids on Friday at the end of the day at 3 o'clock. And if you're moving to a 4.5-day week, that also means that you can tap into and use the buses from the school division at 12 noon. So then there would be no more need for parents to come at the end of the day. So again, that's a positive, but there are negatives, right, that I've mentioned or you may have. So I'm going to pause with that and just see, maybe just first of all, see if there's any questions.
There we go. I've got a few slides here too that we could do now or a little bit later, where I can talk a little bit about how this discussion came up at TCHS and maybe what that might look like at TCHS too, if maybe that'll kind of generate some more thoughts and questions from you as well. So, okay.
Why don't we do that? If you can show some of those things, and then we'll pose it to the room.
Sure. So one other quick thing, as Wilco mentioned with the streaming too, for those of you watching via live stream, you can enter a question on chat, and Mr. Vreen's been monitoring that. And if a question comes through, he'll ask that, and then we'll try our best to answer it as well. So some of you might be wondering, as Wilco said, well, Tabor Christian School is always at 5-day week. Why are we talking about this now? What's the point? And I'll give you a little bit of background as to how this came up. At the high school level, like you indicated, you need the 1,000 hours. And so with the diploma exams, we don't have the ability to be done school June 15 or June 12 or whatever. Even if we do have a long day, we have to go to the end of June. And that was one of the things where we're looking at, and of course, some of these are my opinions, but I'm definitely making an effort to be as neutral as possible. But one of the things we have found, the two main reasons for me that I guess as an educator carry a lot of weight, like what impacts education? I know there's logistic reasons, and obviously those are not unimportant because they impact families, and I've got 4 little kids and I know what running around can do. But for us as educators, what impacts education? What's going to give our students the best chance to be successful? And one of the things we did find in our first year, and even a little bit now, is by the time you hit Friday afternoon with our kids, they're kind of mentally checked out. High school's a little bit more of a challenging year, which it should be, of course, age appropriately. We continue to try and facilitate growth. But Friday afternoons are sometimes a challenge to continue to have kids engage. And so given that we have to go right to the end of June, okay, is there a way we can give them a break throughout the school year that lets them sort of refresh, catch up on some homework, catch up on some family time, and still, be connected that way? That's one of the main reasons. And the second reason, like Wilco indicated for discussion, is that sports. And I know not every kid plays sports, and there's the thought, well, if kids want to play sports, that's their business, and if they miss school, that's their business, and I suppose that's true. But the other aspect to that is often we have staff who are coaching. And so if we have Mr. Vreen leaving Friday at noon for a sports tournament, now we've got kind of a mix and match subbing schedule we're putting into place. And now we have half the class gone, which changes the dynamics in the learning environment. And so those Friday afternoons are sometimes not as strong as if we were to just kind of keep instruction Friday morning when we have all staff in place. The other thing we have noticed, and kids are kids, they see half their classmates leave. Why am I still here? And they're out the door as well. That's part of it too. So those are the reasons. Now, as Wilco said, that's not to suggest there aren't any negatives, there aren't any positives for keeping to a 5-day week, and I want to try and go through that. So as the slide suggests here, one of the main reasons that sort of brought this discussion to a forefront is it allows us to more seamlessly participate in co-curricular. If you look at other high schools in Tabor, generally they're all, and Wilco can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they all have Friday afternoons off, I believe. Yeah, and it's not because they just want to break, as Wilco said, you still need the same amount of hours, but because for them, they're realizing by the time Friday afternoon rolls, when you've got co-curricular, you've got extracurricular, it doesn't work as well to have programming. And so that would be one of the reasons. So we've talked about that a little bit, and we've talked a little bit about the breathing. Like I said, from a programming perspective, those are the things that really resonate with me. Now, that's not to suggest that if this vote doesn't go through and if we remain at a 5-day week, I'm not suggesting that our schooling is going to fall flat or we can't operate. I don't want to suggest that at all. We continue going on and we'll do the best we can. But these are just some things for consideration. And when we're asking, why are we bringing this question forward? Then I would argue for me as an educational leader, I'm kind of being negligent by not bringing this forward. And as Wilco indicated, this will be determined by you. What do you think, right? I'm just posing the question, giving some reasons as to why we want to consider this. If we can go to the next slide. So please don't take this as set in stone, because it's not. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea. But as Wilco said, if this vote does go through, we would have to sit down with Horizon, make sure our times line up with busing, make sure we get those 1,000 hours that he was talking about. But sometimes it helps to just kind of get a bit of an idea, like, okay, this is what it's going to look like. So currently we're starting at around 8:40. We would obviously start earlier. Our break times are really not that different, but I think the big change in the Monday through Thursday schedule, currently we're done at around 2:58, and now of course we'd be going till 3:20, which really is still, in my opinion, not that long of a school day, but we would need that extra time at the end of the day just so that we could get in our 1,000 hours. And then that makes up for the time away from Friday, and I know if busing's at noon, we'd have to tweak that schedule a little bit to make sure we're done at noon. But like I said, this isn't set in stone. It just gives you a rough idea of, okay, well, what would the week look like if that's what we went? And then you can kind of see what an example that would be. Full Friday schedule, this is kind of mirrors what we have right now. The only thing is our days are a bit shorter, so even on a full day Friday schedule, one of the thoughts would be we would still start at 8:40. We could go a bit longer to get a bit of a longer school day in, get more instruction time, and then there's always the possibility of maybe throwing in an extra day off here or there as an alternative. So that would be kind of what that looks like. So the positives, and like I said, there are positives to a full day Friday too. I'm not suggesting it's all negative one way and all positive another way. So I know I've heard from a few parents who've talked about, you know, if they're living in Vauxhall or further east, what do I do when, you know, they're waiting for the Tabor Christian School bus and you're done at 12 or 12:30, what's my kid supposed to do in that time? And fair enough, as Wilco said, I think it kind of goes both ways. We have some parents that live in Tabor that now could currently, if we went to a half-day Friday, they could use Horizon busing and not have to pick up kids. The flip side is, if you have kids on TCS busing, you know, now they got to kind of wait around or whatever. I know we just had exam week, and that's part of high school education as well. And so I've asked some of those parents, well, during exam week, kids come in to write exams, and then they're done for the day. What do they do then? And what we found, some of them will go to a friend's house. Some of them will just continue to study and stay at school and do a little bit of work. I know we had one, which I thought was a great idea, even volunteer at Tabor Christian School and help out there. So there are some possibilities and options, but yeah, that's something to think about. And I think the only other thing I will say is, as we add grade 12 and we get older students and we get a larger student body, we will have the opportunity for students to do carpooling. Like if we have grade 11 and grade 12 students, I mean, of course, with parent permission, that's a possibility too, if you're short on a ride for the one time in the week where that would come up. So positives, consistent bell times, possibly if that's something that's important. Maybe less likely to miss Fridays. I've heard that argument too. Well, if you go to half-day Fridays, you're going to have kids that just say, oh, forget it, I'm not going. But one of the things we would do in scheduling is we would have core scheduled on Friday. So it's still important. I've talked to a few other high school principals about that too, and they generally, the consensus I've got, and again, Wilco, maybe you've heard something different, is there might be a slight increase there, but it's not a lot. It's not really noticeable, is the information that's been shared with me. So, and then of course, yeah, you know, the idea of keeping things consistent with TCS as well. So yeah, that was just a little bit of information there. As Wilco said, he'll probably share a few more things. If you have a question, just ask you to raise your hand. We've got some microphones. I know it's a small group, but if you raise your voice, we can probably hear you. But for those on live stream, they can't hear you unless you speak through a microphone. So if anyone has any thoughts or comments, please raise your hand, and Phil or I will come around and hand over microphones.
Just one more comment as well. So the jurisdiction policy would state that when there is a vote, and whatever the result of the vote is, you're more or less, I'll use the word stuck with it for 3 years. In other words, the will of the population, it's not such that you know, it gets voted down, or it gets voted in one direction or voted in the other direction, and then there are people who are unhappy and they say, well, we want to have a second vote next month, let's bring it back, or let's have another vote again next fall in September. And so the decision of the board more or less is everybody gets a chance to vote. Once you have that decision, whatever it is, you continue to operate like that for 3 years, and if people don't like it, in 3 years, you can get a chance to re-vote. So that's more or less one of the practices. So your vote at this time becomes really, really important, because it will set the path pretty well for your child who's in the school for the remainder of their school year, you know, within the high school.
There's one question here on the live chat. It's asking about Tabor Christian, if they're going to have the same schedule, or is it just going to be continuing to run as it is currently?
Yeah, so the request to move to a 4.5-day week was brought forward from the high school perspective, not the elementary perspective. So the elementary school, the K-9 school, Tabor Christian School, didn't bring a request forward. If they were to, the board policy is that it has to come forward before the end of March. And so if there's a desire by the entire school, as far as the Christian school and the Christian high school to change, they would have to move that same process forward. It would have to go to their school council. They would let me know, and we would do a similar conversation like this. The rationale more so for the high school to move forward is the fact that they have to go to school to the 28th of June, whereas the elementary school has the ability to end earlier. There's no government exam, so I don't believe at this point there was a request to do so. If parents found that the high school did move and they found it inconvenient, they always have the option to, either before March or next year to drum up and have a similar vote for the K-9 school or K-8 school.
And yeah, I certainly don't want to put any words in Klaus' mouth, so you could talk to him if you have further questions about that. One question was asked of me before. If we're talking about a 4.5-day week, well, what about a 4-day week? And I've talked with Wilco about that, and Wilco, could you respond to that, please?
I can. So there's all types of options. I mean, some people have asked, well, couldn't we have a 5-day week and then a 4-day week and alternate back and forth? Couldn't we have solely a 4-day week? There's all types of options, as an example. I mean, and so what we look at is what was the request from the school council and what did the school council pass? And the school council had a conversation around moving to a 4.5-day week. So the schools look exactly the same as the other schools in Tabor. And so that includes all of, W.R. Myers, D.A. Ferguson, all the elementary schools, even the Holy Spirit schools, so the Catholic schools, they're all on a 4.5-day week in Tabor. And so now the high school would align with those. So the vote tonight is really, you want to move to a 4.5-day week, or do you want to keep your current schedule? So that's where the rationale is. If there was a desire for a different schedule, because you're moving into a vote right now, you're really not open to another style of vote for another couple of years.
One of the years we did look at a 4-day week, but one of the reasons that we didn't bring that proposal forward is on a 4-day week, you have to extend your day so much that now we wouldn't even be able to use Horizon busing for any of the days, because the days would have to be too long to get 1,000 hours in 4 days. And so we thought, well, I mean, we already have concerns about the one ride. To take away the Horizon busing option for all 4 days, we just didn't think was very practical.
Yeah, and I've also had people ask in the past, well, is this about teachers getting an easier job where they work less? And the answer there as well is no, because the number of hours they're teaching children will be the exact same no matter which schedule you use. Guys?
Question for about the diploma exams. Are those days absolutely set in stone at the high school level, or could a request be made to move those earlier?
Yeah, no, you can't move those. The government, they're typically high stakes exams, and so the government actually sets the exact date of the exam, and every student in the province writes them not only on the same day, but at the same time. So you actually start your exam, let's say, at 9 in the morning on the 28th, and you have 3.5 hours to write it, and it shuts down at the exact same time for every student in the province. Yeah, so you can't move those.
Other questions?
How does a school like Emmanuel in Lethbridge manage it? They have a 5-day week there at the high school, and you were talking earlier that there would be potentially even a 3-week gap between end of class to diplomas, and that's really not practical at all. But how does a manual then manage that?
I can't comment specifically on a manual schedule. I haven't seen it. But typically what happens is, because you're trying to build the hours into the year, if you look at making your days shorter, you need more of them, as an example, right? And so what ends up happening is, can you do it with a 5-day week? Well, you can, and you say, well, I don't want to finish on June 10th, I want to finish on June 28th. Well, you can. What happens is, you make every day a half hour shorter. The issue becomes now is that's if your school is potentially not connected to another school, you can do that because you just have the buses come a half hour earlier. You can't do that in Tabor because your buses, the end of your day is already preset for buses because they're already connected to all of the other schools. So that's the rationale. So if you think about it, it's kind of, changing your school by 1 minute. There's 183 days in the school year typically for students. There's around 200 or so by the time, if you include all of the days that the teachers work as well. But what ends up happening is that if for every minute, you've got 183 minutes. So you're looking at almost, you're looking at 3 hours is 1 minute. So if you make your school 1 minute shorter, you can you have to put in 3 extra hours somewhere else. But that would be my sense of how they do it, is they start, their school day is a different length. You can't really change the start and end time of the school day here because you're connected to busing from the other schools.
Yeah, I have a little experience with the manual. So if I could just add to that, Emmanuel runs their own busing. They don't run Lethbridge School Division busing because a lot of their students come from outside Lethbridge School Division territory. And so then as a result, they're more free to set their own hours and their own schedule. Of course, with that comes a pretty significant cost that they have to pay for, whereas, like Wilco said, we're tied in with Horizon busing, so that changes it a little bit. Other questions? You all have your mind made up. It's okay, let's go with this already.
And if you have a strong opinion one way or the other, and you want to share your thoughts with somebody else in the room and say, well, I think they're going to vote the other way, I want to try and convince them my way, you can certainly have an opportunity here as well if you want to share some thoughts. But why one way is better than the other. So if you want to do that, we're certainly welcoming that as well. And if not, I think then we're probably reaching the end of our meeting. And we'll hand out the votes.
Maybe while you're thinking of a last minute question, like Wilco alluded to those of you who are not here and watching on live stream, we will have the ability, or we will certainly give you the ability to vote. Google form will be sent out on Friday, and one of the questions on the Google form is your name, and the same with the ballot. We're asking families to sign it, just so we can keep track of the 1 vote per family. But people will have an opportunity to get it in. Like I said, or like Wilco said, needs to be in by February 14. But that will be a choice. So we'll send out a Google form. If we don't hear from some families, we will contact them, and then maybe electronic or technology is not their thing. If that's the case, then we would mail them one of the ballots that we have here, and then they could fill that out that way.
And just I can add one thing. As Jason mentioned, we want your name so we know who you are, so that we know you have a child in the school. For all we know, it could be a parent or a community member who's voting, and people are going, well, I have no idea who this person is, and they may have found the ballot laying on a pew in the church, as an example. So we certainly want to make sure that it's 1 vote for family, and then what we will do as well is it is I'll say anonymous. All that will be shared with the group is the final number. It's not who voted how or what. All we're sharing is what % of the families voted in favor and what % of the families voted against. So that's the only number that'll be shared publicly. No, it's great. Because the school next year, hopefully moving into the new building, my understanding is the society is looking at that as a 9 to 12 school. So parents who will have kids in school next year, so grade 8 parents this year, will be allowed to vote because your kids will be in school next year and will be in that school for the next couple of years. So yes, you all have a chance to vote.
Just to clarify too, the ballots look like this, just to clarify what Wilk was talking about. And so at the very top, you're indicating if you're a parent or staff member. And then the second section, if you're a parent, will you have a school at TCHS next year? Like I said, 9 through 12. And then, of course, the actual vote on the topic. So that's just what they look like for clarification. So,
yeah, so staff do get a chance to vote. But the number I mentioned earlier, the 66%, that is the number we need from parents to be in favor of it for it to change. So if there's 100% in favor for staff, as an example, and parents say it's 50%, it doesn't move forward. We need 66% in favor from the parents' side, just so you're aware of that fact as well.
Just wondering if you could clarify on the slide that had some of the positives for staying with a 5-day week. I think it said on the bottom that they would get 5 additional days off. Yeah. So does that mean that they would, like, I'm just wondering then, like, is that a pretty real thing that they would get, there would be 5 whole days that they wouldn't get off if they went to a 4.5-day week?
yeah, and playing with the schedule, because we would have a surplus of days. Now, actually, after redoing it, it might be 4, but yes, that would be the opposite. And that's if we made the end of the day longer, then we could have a few extra days off. Yeah.
So it all comes back down to the number of hours. And if you have full day Fridays, you get your hours quicker. But since you have to go to the same length of time, you have to reduce it some other way. And so how do you reduce that? Well, you may scatter some days where there's no students for a full day somewhere throughout the calendar. Yeah, some people may very much like that. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, some people may find that. Some people may look at that and go, well, now I have to find daycare scattered through. If it was an elementary school, they would look at that and go, well, now I have non-consistent daycare I have to find. So you're right. It could be very positive for some people. Absolutely.
The reason we didn't propose that, although I can appreciate if that's a big thing for you, is again, if I go back to programming, how do we get kids the 1,000 hours more meaningful time? And so again, with the co-curricular on Friday afternoons, that kind of disrupts it. So that wouldn't necessarily impact that. And then if they have a term, they still have to come to school. So, but I hear what you're saying. That is a potential positive of staying with a 5-day week for sure.
Just a question, you were talking about extending the day by 20 minutes or so during the week for a 4.5-day week. How would that affect, say, for my children from Vauxhall? Would they still catch that Vauxhall bus going home even though they're in class for 20 minutes longer during the week? The bus times would still line up?
Jason, I'm not, you and I may need to touch base on that piece as well, because ultimately when you're looking at, whether you're looking at a 4.5-day week or a 5-day week, if you're using the jurisdiction buses, right, you have to build your school calendar between the start and the end time of when the buses come. So you don't necessarily have a lot of flexibility, and I can't remember what your start and end time are right now in terms of the buses, but you have to bookend them with those buses. Yeah.
Just to respond, the answer is yes. Like I said, it was a sample schedule. Don't take those times to heart. It just kind of gives you a general idea. But I know somebody asked that at school council, and because we have all these other high schools that do a 4.5-day week and are still able to utilize Horizon busing, then we would be able to as well. Yeah. So I'll just explain the voting process, and then I'm going to ask Klaus Hoekstra to come up and close with us. So the ballots are all here. So just ask you to come up, one per family as was discussed, fill these out. We do have a pen here. Maybe just fold it up and then put it in this basket. And again, please remember to put your name on it. So, all right, Klaus, I'll invite you to come up. Thanks again to everybody for coming out, and yeah, hope to continue this discussion.
I've got one more question. Can we pick it up at the school? The ballots, I'm assuming. Pick up the ballots at the school. So maybe just clarify that.
The answer is yes, just we need them back by the 15th. So I'd just like to close off our evening. First of all, big thanks to Mr. Jason Visser and Dr. Tymonson for presenting and spending time here. It was 3 years ago we met and we said, are we going to do this? We said, yep, let's do it. It was 2 years ago we said, are we for sure going to do it? And we said, we're for sure going to do it. So I've been sitting back there just grinning the whole time. It's so awesome that we have this opportunity. And I know you're smiling under your masks. So thank you for participating in this evening. For those on live stream as well, thank you for participating, or those who will listen to this a little bit later as well. I'd like to close our evening in order of prayer. Let's bow our heads. Gracious Lord, I give you thanks for the many blessings we have. Lord, for Tabor Christian Schools, for the staff, for the community, for the kids and the parents that support us, Lord, that we can live out your will for our lives, to teach these young children, these young men and women about your love, about your plan for their future, Lord. And I give you thanks that you have blessed us so richly. Let us not forget, Lord, that these come directly from you. Lord, I ask that you keep us safe as we travel from here, from this evening. Lord, that you would give us good rest tonight so that we can continue our task of serving you and serving others with joy in our hearts. Lord, I pray that you be with those of us who are struggling during this time, struggling with health or emotional or physical needs, Lord, that you would bless us. And as a community, Lord, that we would lift each other up in prayer and in support. And Lord, I ask again that you continue to bless our school community. Lord, thank you for the leadership that we have, for the staff members as well, and for those who are entrusted in taking care of your children. And we pray this all in your Son's most gracious name. Amen. Have a wonderful evening. Come on up and grab a ballot, and we'll see you sometime soon.